Okay, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We're in the Sefer Ben La'ashri Parshas Va'era. We're going to start with the piece Loi Noidati Lahem. Before we begin, we always mention that the Ben La'ashri, the Tzaddik Miranana, Rabbi Yitzchak Ben Asher Anshel HaKohen, unfortunately, him and his wife did not have children, and the learning should be a schus for them. When we learn their Torah in this world, not only, as we know, their lips move in the kavers, the size of Doivos Bekaver, they're actually alive, because their neshama is represented in these words, right? Their neshama brought down these words into this world. So when we repeat it over, besides the fact that it is chus to them, they're also alive again in this world. Just like when we learn about what Abaye said and what Rava said, they're come to life again, even many years later. And as we begin, we want to thank again our sponsor, the Dvar Torah Foundation, for making this share possible. So the piece begins, Loi Nodati Lahem. Now, all the Mefarshim ask, according to the diktuk of Hebrew of Lashon HaKodesh, Loi Noidati Lahem should have been Loi Hoidati Lahem. I did not let them know. The nun is not the correct diktuk for this word. So the Ben La'ashri, Api Soid, Api Remez, says a beautiful understanding why Kadosh Baruch Hu used the letter nun as opposed to the letter hey. What is the meaning here? There's obviously Pashup Shat. We're going to dig a little deeper. Alpi Drush, Remez, and Soid. Loi Nadati Lahem, Rosh Tevis Gematria Nes. If you take the first three letters of these words, Loi, which is a Lamed, Nadati, which is a Nun, Lahem, which is a Lamed, has the same Gematria as Nes. Nes is 60 plus 50, the Nun is 50, Samach is 60, so that's 110. Lamed and Lamed is 60, the Nun again is another 50. Then base oisios. Now, if you take the two letters of Nes, Nun, and Samach, you have the gematria Havaya Elokim. Hainu shekol oilam nivra v'nisava yidei shetzimtzum or ein soif. Now, this is, Kabbalah Basic 101. Before the world was created, there was only Hashem. There was no beginning, there was no end, there was no left, there was no right, there was no middle, there was nothing. It's a little hard for us to understand this because we are physical. We are limited by certain physical components and conditions that Hashem created into the world. But before HaKadosh Baruch Hu created physicality, it was all ruchnius. So there was no beginning, end, there was no time, there was no decay. So in order for Hashem to create the world, Hashem had to do what's called tzimtzum. He had to retract some of his or to create an area where physicality can exist. Now only Hashem could do that, because in reality Hashem didn't do anything. So Hashem created physicality from nothing. In order to do that, Hashem had to be mitzamtzem, had to withdraw a little bit of Elokus, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to create this world. Shezehu aidei shehitzil shem HaKadosh Elokim. By using the name Elokim. Elokim is midas hadin. Din is always, you're constricted, you're tight. There's a din. Rachein b'chol ma'aser Bereshis. That's why if you go through Parshas Bereshis, all the mice of creation, Niska Rak Shem HaKadosh Elokim. HaKadosh Baruch Hu used the name Elokim to create physicality, because he had to withdraw Ruchnius. The L'shiyah his Ava Habriya B'Poyel Mamash. Zenifal Ayidei Shem HaKadosh Elokim. To create something, HaKadosh Baruch Hu has to use the word Elokim. We're going to learn a very important lesson for us to understand. Unknown, however, once Hashem created the world, the continuation of the world had to be only Midas HaChesed. Because if you have constriction, if you have tightness, if you have a drip flow, nothing can exist. Like with the famous Medrash says that the world could not be miskayim with midas adin. He combined it with midas arachim. You need always these two midas to the world to exist. When it says now, when Hashem created the world, you have the two names of Hashem, Hashem Elokim. Hiskir Shem Malay Al Olam Malay. He mentioned his full name on the full world once the world was created. And this is what Rashi wants to teach us here. If the pasuk would have written with a hey, then the Rosh Tevis of Lamed, hey Lamed would be 35, or would be Shem HaKadosh Aleph Daled. Shubechinas Dina de Machusa Dina. And that is not the correct midah of Hashem. Hashem's midah is not midah sadin, it's midah sarachman. The tzimtzum v'din himrak l'tzarich habriya. In order to create something, you have to be mitzamtzim yourself. Unfortunately, when any of us go through a nisayon, that's midas hadin. Things become tight. Things become difficult. The siyata d'shmaya gets pulled back a little bit. The Shef of Hashem is withdrawn a drop. There's a lot of reasons for that. But ultimately, we all know that when we come out of the nisayon, we're always better people. And how do we come out? Once we get to that situation where we now have to work on ourselves and to build ourselves, then we have midas hachesed. And that is the ultimate purpose of everything, is midas hachesed. And loy mahani kanal. The midas hamitishali shukiyim oilan. The midas hamiti of Hashem is the existence of the world. And that, the pasuk says that I told the avos loy nodati lahem. It had to be with the nun. Why? Because midas hachesed is what keeps the world growing. But as long as they did not make kind the bris with them, Klal Yisrael did not yet get the Torah, did not yet get into Eretz Yisrael. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, "V'loi nodati lahem," I cannot yet reveal to the avos my full name of Shem HaChesed. That is why the Ben Lashri learns Hashem had to use, the pasuk had to use the word Lamed, Nun Lamed, as opposed to Loi Nodati Lahem. We're now going to skip to another piece. A very interesting shaila that probably everybody wondered. We're skipping now to page Samach. It begins, Vayikach Amram es Yocheved. We mentioned this, I believe, in last week's shir. Amram took Yocheved, his aunt, for a wife. Vateled lo es Ahron ves Moshe. So there's a lot of questions. If you look at this pasuk, there's a lot of diukim. First of all, why do you have to say that Yocheved was his aunt? Is it necessary for us to know? In addition, what happened to Miriam? Where's Miriam in the picture? It says Vateled lo es Ahron ves Moshe. What about Miriam? It should have been Miriam, Ahron. It should have been Ahron, Miriam, and Moshe. Yesh ledaktek mipnei ma lo niskar zois tekef lamala. Another shaila that the Ben Lashri asks. In last week's parsha, it just says that vayikach ish es ha'isha. It doesn't say that their names were Amram and Yocheved. Why not? Ma mipnei ma lo niskar zois tekef lamala beperik beis, where it says vayelech ish mebeis Levi loy loymar vayelech Amram vayikach es Yocheved dadosai bas Levi. Why did I have to wait till this week's parsha to tell us who was who? Like we mentioned before, Lama lo niskar kan Miriam. Why wasn't Miriam mentioned here? Moshe v'Aaron yichas kol shevet Levi va'agav heim gam shiftei Reuven v'Shimon shein shaychem klal yichas Moshe v'Aaron. Right? If you want to be miyaches the whole shevet Levi, the main purpose, the main person here of Klal Yisrael Moshe Rabbeinu was Miriam, because we know that when Amram divorced his wife Yocheved, the whole Klal Yisrael, the older men divorced their women. Who brought everybody back together was Miriam. She went to her father, she had a taina. You're worse than Paroi. Paroi was only decreed on the men, you decreed on the women. And Amram said, you're right. He got remarried. Everybody then followed suit and they got remarried. And that was the continuation of Klal Yisrael. Obviously, and Moshe Rabbeinu, who's connected Klal Yisrael. So, the Ben Lashri says, how could you not mention Miriam? She hoises sibo hikaris. She was the main reason and the main factor that Moshe Rabbeinu was born. In addition to the next following people that were born were only because of Miriam. She has a tremendous chus, and you don't put her in the pasuk? So the Ben Lashri has a beautiful diak, how you understand each pasuk. Every pasuk is coming to teach us a message, and you have to really learn every pasuk with its full context, and obviously you have to have siyata d'shmaya. So in order to answer, we have to start with the first question we mentioned. Why did the Torah have to mention at all that Yocheved was his aunt? For what purpose? Is it necessary for us to know? So the Ben Lashri teaches us a famous yisoid that's brought down in the Gemara, in Yuma. Why wasn't Malchus Shaul continued? Why wasn't there no continuity to Malchus Shaul? Now it's true, David HaMelech had to become king, but he didn't have to become king right away. Shaul's son could have become king. It's true that Shaul's other son did become king for a short period of time, but his son Yochanan did not become king. He was killed, Yonasan was killed. He was really the next in line, And it wasn't continued. Why not? Shaul, as opposed to what many people think, he was a perfect tzaddik. There was nothing wrong with him. There was no doifi. And we were afraid, says the Chachamim, that he would become a Balgaiva. He would say, look at me, I'm the king because there's no perfect tzaddik like me. We don't put somebody to be a head of a tzibur unless he has something in the closet to hide. Because if he ever gets a little bit too big of himself, we say, listen, hey, buddy, if you're not careful, we're going to let people know what's behind that door. Right? Yosef HaTzadik told Paro, please let me bring Yaakov to Maris HaMachpelah, because if not, I'm going to let people know that you really don't know everything and you're really not who you say you are. Go back, don't be so full of yourself. Why did the Torah specifically say over here? Because here, in our Parsha, the Torah is coming to be Miyaches Klal Yisrael, to show the lineage of every individual. When we come to Moshe Rabbeinu, we tell Klal Yisrael, we tell Moshe Rabbeinu specifically, yeah, you're the leader of Klal Yisrael. You speak to Hashem peh el peh. HaKadosh Baruch Hu said that there's no one in the entire galaxy, in all of my creations, like you, Moshe Rabbeinu. But remember, your father did something, that's a little funny at best. We can't say it, but Lamaisa, that's what it brings down. Right? This pasuk is now telling us the yichus of every individual in order to raise them to become leaders. Now, even though Yocheved Amram married his aunt before Kabbalah Torah, however, for Moshe Rabbeinu, this was enough to say to him, remember who your father married, remember who your mother was. Now, to me, I have an interesting kasha here because it's funny to ask, but interestingly enough, Korach did not use this as a reason to passel Moshe Rabbeinu. So Parshat would be that everybody understood that this was before Matan Torah, and therefore wasn't a problem. Because if it really was a problem, Korach, Dasan, and Aviram would have brought it up right away. But something just to point out. And therefore, over here, this was only to be miyachas them, and specifically Moshe and Ahron. Miriam was not one of the leaders of Klal Yisrael. It's true that she was the head of the women, and she was always with the women, and she sang, but the real leaders of Klal Yisrael were Moshe and Ahron. And therefore, the pasuk specifically said over here, when we were pointing and showing who Moshe and Ahron came from, don't get ahead of yourself, Moshe Rabbeinu and Ahron HaKohen, because you know who your father married. In the other parsha, has nothing to do with this. This is just to say when Moshe Rabbeinu was wrong. And there's no point to say that at that point Amram married his aunt. There's no reason for it. Over here, there is a reason for it. To remind Moshe Rabbeinu and Ahron, your father did something funny. It's true that it's before Matan Torah, and it's true that Yaakov Avinu married two sisters. But for you, Moshe Rabbeinu, it's something just to be aware of. And therefore, Masha Enkin, Miriam Shalei Nasas Parnasas, Miriam, who was not made into a leader, there's no purpose to mention her here. Over here, we're not mentioning all of their children. We're just mentioning who were the leaders. And that's why over here it didn't mention Miriam, even though we know that Miriam was the main reason of Moshe Rabbeinu. The whole Torah that we have, and everything that we have, is only because ultimately, if you think about it, Miriam HaKadoisha. We're going to move on to one more piece. It's a very short piece. It's really a very deep piece that really requires a shir on its own. We're going to learn it because I think, at least for us, maybe to be mizboinen and to contemplate a little bit will be of great benefit to us. The pasuk says, and it's a very interesting question. Moshe Rabbeinu comes to Paroi. Aaron takes the stick, turns it into a snake. Paroi laughs at him and says, every kindergarten kid knows how to do that. They all took their sticks and they turned it into snakes. Okay. What did Aaron do? He picked up the tail of the snake and it turned into a stick. And according to some Midrashim, the Egyptians, the Khatumim, did the same thing. Okay, so now we're all even. We all have sticks. What happened? Aaron's stick went ahead and swallowed all the other sticks. Says the Ben Moshe, how's that possible? In order to defeat Tumah, you can't be the same level, l'chayra. You're all sticks. You're a colored stick. They are a Tumadika stick. What's going on over here? Vayivla mat Ahron es mitoisam. Pirish Rashi, la'achar shenasa matos. After they became sticks, then Aaron's stick swallowed all the other sticks. Yesh loymar demikan lamdu b'sfar makdoshim. This is a major yisoid that all the Sifrei Kabbalah learn. We'll try to explain it to the best of my ability. And really, like I said, this is a very deep concept, and there's also a lot for us to learn al pi derech hatshuva. The be'im hakdusha v'aklipa shavin, that if kedusha and klipa are equal, bigematria, right? We know that every letter has a gematria, but every letter has a gematria that represents its koyach. The letter Hey has certain power. We don't know today how to access that power, but Lamaisa, the proof is that Betzalel would take names, right? And he would create things. The table is called a shulchan, right? How did Hashem create the materials for a shulchan? He took the shin, he took the lamed, he took the ches, and he took the nun sofis, combined them together, created the concept in this world called a table, and so on and so forth. That energy, that name, those koyach, right, has the ability to create a table, and so on and so forth. So now, when you have something davar shebekdusha, let's say a korban chatos, right, and opposite you have something that's a davar shebetuma, right, or you have paroi, which is the name of paroi, which is the name of tumah. When you take those letters with that combination, it creates a klipa called paroi, whatever that klipa represents. It's hard for us to understand, but it's basically a serial number, a code, right? When a coder puts into a computer different numbers, 1001, 000, it's all what creates it? It's a language that a computer understands, and by you typing in that language, it creates something. Now, we don't use it today because we have an interface called Windows or Apple, but 20, 30 years ago, people had to punch in, it's called, DAS, I think it was, and today you also have it with different software programs. Lahavdil Elfei Alofim, the same thing. Hashem created a code, right? The language of this world to be created is called the Aleph Beis Oisios, the Aleph through Taf. If you know how to use that combination, and obviously you have to be a Davar Shebekdusha or Chas Shalom of Davar Shebetuma to be able to manipulate those words to create things, right? Like we said before, Betzalel took the names of Hashem, different shemas, different names, and he was able to be through Mitzarav Tzirufim, he created things. So when you have a Davar Shebekdusha that has a gematria, and a Davar Shebetuma that has the same gematria automatically as Koyach HaKedusha Goiver. How do we know this? From here. Aaron took his stick and swallowed up all the other sticks. They were equal. There was no difference between one stick and the other stick. His chazik alamatis atmeim abaloisam. When a person is coming to do tshuva, when he's coming to do different things, it's obviously the more the merrier, but you should know that your job is to be equal to the tzara tuma. And if you do that, you're automatically going to be able to overcome it. Balabatish, Pashut Pshat would be because in the tumah there's kedusha. So when you are able to create a situation where you are now completely equal to it, it automatically awakens the tumah, the kedusha that's in the tumah, and causes it to collapse. So we see from here a beautiful understanding in this pasuk Vayivla Mata Aras Mataisam. How every pasuk in the Torah can teach us not only Parshat Pshat, but even deep Kabbalistic secrets, like we see over here. May the schus of the Ben Ashri be zoichet us, that we should have our prayers and our bakashas be mispal, and should be schus for his neshama as well. Amen. Have a wonderful Shabbos.